Here's something I've been thinking about. When a romantic relationship ends, everyone understands. They've been there. They know the script. They know to bring ice cream and wine and bad movies. They know to let you talk about it for months without getting bored. There are playlists for this. Thousands of songs about heartbreak. Movies where the protagonist cries in the rain and eventually finds someone better. A whole industry built around the pain of romantic loss. Your friends check in. How are you holding up? Your family understands if you're not yourself for a while. Work gives you space. People send flowers, or at least texts. You're allowed to grieve. You're expected to grieve. There's even a name for what you're going through. Heartbreak. Everyone knows that word. Everyone knows what it means. Everyone has felt it or will feel it. But when you lose a friend, silence. No playlist. No movie about the protagonist crying over a friendship that ended. No cultural script for how to process this, how long it should take, what you're supposed to feel. When you tell someone you're grieving a friendship, there's this pause, this slight confusion, like you've made a grammatical error and they're trying to figure out what you actually mean. Oh, you guys had a falling out. No, not exactly. Did something happen? Not really. Or maybe. I don't know. Well, just reach out. I'm sure it'll be fine. And that's where it ends. The conversation moves on. Because there's no cultural framework for this. No shared understanding that the loss of a deep friendship can hollow you out in ways that take years to understand. No word for it. No ceremony. No casseroles from neighbors. No one asking how you're holding up weeks later. No one expecting you to still be sad about it months down the line. Just silence. And the strange expectation that you should be fine. Because after all, it was just a friend. Just. As if friendship is a lesser thing. As if the people who chose you, without obligation, without romance, without any pressure except the simple fact that they wanted you in their life, as if losing them should be easy, should be something you get over quickly, should be something that doesn't really count. I don't think that's true. I don't think the hierarchy we've built makes any sense. And I think a lot of people are carrying grief they're not allowed to name. I want to ask you something. Is there someone you used to be close to, maybe your closest person at some point, who you haven't really talked to in months? Maybe years. Someone whose number is still in your phone, but you can't remember the last time you called it. Someone you see on social media sometimes, living their life, and there's this strange feeling. Not quite sadness, not quite anger, something harder to name. Someone you lost, not to death, not to a dramatic fight, just lost. If there is, I want you to know something. That loss is real. It counts. And you're allowed to feel the weight of it, even if no one around you understands why. I think about this a lot, about the hierarchy of relationships we've built that doesn't match reality. Romantic love at the top, family somewhere in the middle, friendship at the bottom, treated like something optional, replaceable, less serious. But anyone who's actually experienced both kinds of loss knows that's wrong. Losing a friend can break you just as badly as losing a partner, sometimes worse, because at least when romance ends, people understand. They've been there. They know the weight. When friendship ends, you grieve alone, and you're not even sure you're allowed to call it grief. I want to tell you about a man who understood this. His name was Michel de Montaigne. He lived in France in the 1500s. He's considered one of the greatest essayists who ever lived. His writing influenced Shakespeare, Nietzsche, Emerson. He basically invented the personal essay as a form. But before he wrote anything, before any of that mattered, he had a friendship. His friend's name was Étienne de La Boétie. They met when Montaigne was around 25, at a civic function neither of them wanted to attend. And something happened that Montaigne spent the rest of his life trying to explain. It wasn't love at first sight. It was something stranger, recognition, like meeting someone and realizing you've been waiting for them without knowing it, like finding a conversation you didn't know you'd been missing your whole life. They became inseparable. And I don't mean that in the casual way people use the word. I mean actually inseparable. They talked for hours every day. They wrote to each other constantly when apart. They shared ideas that neither of them could have had alone. Their minds worked better together than they did separately. For 4 years, they were closer than brothers, closer than lovers, closer than anything Montaigne had experienced before or would experience after. Montaigne described it as a fusion, 2 souls becoming one. He said their friendship had no seams, no edges, where one of them ended and the other began. They didn't have separate thoughts. They had thoughts together. It was as if they shared a single mind that happened to live in 2 bodies. And then La Boétie got sick, a fever that wouldn't break. And over the course of a few terrible days, Montaigne sat at his bedside and watched his friend die. La Boétie was 32. They'd had 4 years together. That's all. His last words to Montaigne were about their friendship, even dying, even fading, even as his mind slipped away. He wanted Montaigne to know what they had meant to each other. And then he was gone. Montaigne was destroyed. Not in the dramatic way we usually mean when we say that. He didn't fall apart publicly. He didn't stop functioning. He went back to his life, his work, his responsibilities. But something inside him went quiet. A room in his mind that had been full of conversation was suddenly permanently empty. And for the rest of his life, no matter what else happened, that room stayed empty. He got married a few years later, had children, became mayor of Bordeaux, wrote the essays that would make him immortal. But he never stopped grieving. Years later, when people asked him to explain that friendship, to put into words what La Boétie meant to him, Montaigne wrote the most honest thing I've ever read about losing someone. He said, "If you press me to say why I loved him, I can say no more than because he was he and I was I. Because he was he and I was I. That's it. That's all he could say." 4 years of the most important relationship of his life, and the only explanation was, we were us. There was no reason. There was no logic. There was just the fact of it, undeniable and inexplicable. In his most famous work, he left a gap, a literal hole in the text where an essay by La Boétie was supposed to go. He couldn't bring himself to fill it. The absence was more honest than anything he could have written. 27 years after La Boétie's death, near the end of his own life, Montaigne was still writing about that friendship, still trying to understand it, still feeling the loss. He wrote, "In my most tender years, I was exposed to the companionship of a great man, to taste the sweetness of which has rendered me ever since unfit for the ordinary commerce of men." Read that again. He's saying that having known true friendship ruined him for normal relationships. That after experiencing that kind of connection, everything else felt pale. That he spent the rest of his life knowing what was possible and never finding it again. Some people read that as tragedy. Poor Montaigne, unable to move on. I read it as honesty, as respect for what he had, as refusal to pretend that some losses can be gotten over. So why does losing a friend hurt so much? I think Montaigne understood something about friendship that we've forgotten. Or maybe we never learned it, or maybe we know it but we're not allowed to say it out loud. Friendship is the purest form of choosing someone. Think about it. Romantic love has all these other things tangled up in it. Physical desire, social expectation, economic partnership. The pressure to build a life together, have children, check boxes. Family you don't choose at all. You're born into it. The bonds are there whether you want them or not. But friendship is pure choice. Two people who look at each other and decide, without obligation, without contract, without any external pressure, I want you in my life. Not because I have to, not because society expects it, not because of anything except that I looked at who you are and I chose you, which is exactly why losing it hurts so much. Because if someone leaves a marriage, there are 1,000 explanations that have nothing to do with you. Incompatibility, different life goals, the slow erosion of attraction, forces beyond anyone's control. You can tell yourself, it wasn't me, it was circumstances. But if a friend leaves, they just chose to. They looked at who you are, without the fog of romance, without the weight of obligation, and they decided they didn't want it anymore. That's a different kind of rejection. That's not, we grew apart. That's not, the timing was wrong. That's, I saw you clearly, and I walked away. I'm not saying this to make it hurt more. I'm saying it because I think part of why friendship loss is so confusing is that we don't let ourselves acknowledge how deep it actually cuts. We minimize it. We tell ourselves it's not that serious. We feel embarrassed for being so affected by something that's just a friendship. But your pain is not an overreaction. Your grief is not dramatic. You lost something real, and you're allowed to feel the weight of that loss. Let me tell you about another way friendships end. Because not all of them explode. Not all of them have a clear moment where you can say, that's when it happened. Most of them whisper. There's a psychologist named Pauline Boss who studies something she calls ambiguous loss. It's the kind of loss that doesn't have clear edges, where someone is gone but not gone, where you can't point to a moment and say, that's when it ended. I think most friendship endings are ambiguous losses. You don't get a final fight. You don't get a dramatic confrontation. You don't get closure. You get fade. The messages get shorter. The responses take longer. The "we should hang out" becomes a ritual phrase that both of you know means nothing. You remember how it used to be. You'd text something random and get a response immediately. You'd spend hours talking about nothing. You'd make plans without having to check schedules, because of course you were free for each other. They were the first person you'd tell when something happened, good or bad. Now you text and see read with no reply. Or worse, you see them posting on social media while your message sits unanswered. They have time, just not for you. You see them comment on other people's posts, laughing with others, making plans with others, living a life that you used to be part of, and now you're watching from the outside. The plans become vague. Let's get dinner sometime instead of let's get dinner Thursday. And you both know that sometime means never, but neither of you says it out loud. You play along. You say, definitely, let me know when you're free. And neither of you follows up. The birthday messages get shorter each year. First a long text with inside jokes and memories. Then a brief happy birthday with an emoji. Then just the emoji. Then nothing at all. And you notice. But you don't say anything. Because what would you say? Hey, you used to care more about my birthday. You can't say that. So you don't say anything. You see them at a mutual friend's party and it's awkward. You hug hello, but the hug is wrong. Too brief, too formal. You used to be the kind of friends who didn't let go for 10 seconds. Now you barely touch before pulling away. You make small talk. How's work? How's the apartment? Any travel plans? The questions people ask when they don't know what else to say. When they're filling silence because the real conversation, the one about what happened between you, is too hard to have. And the worst part is the uncertainty. Did I do something? Did something happen that I don't know about? Are they going through something? Are they just busy? Am I being paranoid? Am I being needy? Should I reach out again? Would that be desperate? Have I already reached out too many times? You analyze everything. That text they sent last month, the way they said goodbye last time you met, the tone of their voice when you called, looking for clues, looking for evidence of what you did wrong or what changed. You replay our conversations in your head. Was it something I said? Was there a moment where I hurt them and didn't realize? Did I miss something important? Did I not show up for them when they needed me? This uncertainty is torture, and I mean that almost clinically. The human brain handles clear bad news better than it handles ambiguity. We can process grief when we know what we're grieving. We struggle to process maybe. We struggle to grieve something that might not even be dead. When someone dies, there's a brutal clarity. They're gone. The loss is total and undeniable. You can begin the terrible work of accepting it. When a friendship fades, there's no clarity. They're not gone. They're just increasingly absent. And you're left in this limbo where you can't quite grieve because technically nothing happened. But you also can't quite hope because something clearly changed. You can't move on because you're not sure there's anything to move on from. But you can't stay because there's nothing to stay in. So you wait and check and wonder and analyze. And it's exhausting, not just emotionally, actually exhausting. The cognitive load of managing that uncertainty, of constantly monitoring a relationship that might or might not still exist, of never being sure where you stand. It takes up space in your mind, even when you're not thinking about it directly. Some part of you is always holding that question. What happened? What went wrong? Is it over? Here's what I think we lose when we lose a friend. And I want to be specific about this because I think the specificity matters. You lose a witness. A friend, especially a long-term friend, is someone who has seen your history. They remember who you were before you became who you are now. They know the embarrassing phases, the abandoned dreams, the versions of yourself you've outgrown. They were there when you failed that exam, when you had that terrible haircut, when you were obsessed with that thing you're now embarrassed to mention, when you cried over that person whose name you can barely remember now. They carry evidence of your continuity, proof that you were someone before you were this, that there's a thread connecting who you were at 17 to who you are now. When they leave, they take that witnessing with them. It's like what Montaigne said about La Boétie. After he died, Montaigne felt like parts of his own history became inaccessible. Because the person who shared them, who could confirm them, who could say, yes, that really happened, I was there, was gone. Suddenly memories you had together become only yours, and memories that only exist in one mind feel less real, more like dreams than history. You lose a language. Old friends speak in references. Inside jokes accumulated over years. A single word that triggers a whole story. A look that communicates what would take anyone else paragraphs to explain. Remember that time in... Oh God, yes. And both of you are laughing before anyone finishes the sentence. You have whole conversations in half sentences. Because you don't need to explain the context. They were there for the context. They are the context. When that friendship ends, you lose that entire language. All those references become meaningless. The inside jokes die because there's no one left who gets them. You might try to explain them to someone new. There was this time when, but it's never the same. The joke loses something in the translation. The magic was that you didn't have to explain. You lose a version of yourself. We're different people with different friends. Not fake, just different. Some friends bring out your silliness. Some bring out your depth. Some make you feel smart. Some make you feel brave. There's a version of you that only exists with certain people. The you that's unguarded in a specific way. The you that says things you wouldn't say to anyone else. The you that's comfortable in a way you have to build toward with everyone else. When you lose a friend, you lose access to whoever you were with them. That version of yourself has nowhere to exist anymore. And sometimes, that version was a version you liked. A version that felt more real than the one you show most people. And now, it has no home. You lose a future. This is the one people don't talk about. When a friendship ends, you don't just lose what was. You lose what would have been. The trips you would have taken. The conversations you would have had. The jokes you would have made. The way they would have been there for the things that haven't happened yet. You lose them at your wedding. Or not at your wedding, because maybe you didn't get married. But at whatever the next big thing is. The thing you would have called them about. The thing that would have felt incomplete without telling them. That loss is invisible but real. A whole parallel timeline that will never exist now. All the future memories you'll never make together. And sometimes, at random moments, you think of something you want to tell them. And then you remember. And there's this small grief all over again. A fresh cut from an old wound. So what do? I'm not going to give you 5 steps. I don't believe in 5 steps. Grief doesn't work that way. Loss doesn't have a formula. But I can tell you what I've been thinking about. What's helped me. What I wish someone had told me. Let it hurt. I know that sounds obvious. But most people don't actually do it. They distract. They minimize. They tell themselves it's not that serious. They move on before they've actually processed. We're especially bad at this with friendship loss, because there's no social permission to grieve it. No one brings you casseroles. No one asks how you're holding up weeks later. So you feel like you should be fine, and you pretend to be fine. And the grief goes underground, where it does different kinds of damage. The pain exists for a reason. It's proportional to what you lost. Trying to skip it doesn't make it go away. It just delays it, or transforms it into something worse. Bitterness, numbness, a vague sense that something's wrong, but you can't name what. So let it hurt. For however long, it hurts. Even if no one around you understands why you're grieving, you know why. That's enough. Don't try to replace them. There's a temptation after losing a close friend to immediately find someone new, to fill the gap, to prove you're not alone, to find someone who can be what they were. Resist this. New friendships are wonderful, but they're not band-aids for old wounds. If you use them that way, you'll put pressure on them they can't bear, and you'll still be carrying the grief from the first loss under the surface. And the new person isn't them. The new person is a different person who will mean different things, who will bring out different versions of you. That's not a failure. That's how friendship works. Every friendship is unique. You can't substitute one for another. Let the new friendships be new. Let the old loss be old. They can coexist. Give yourself permission to be angry. Not everyone talks about this, but it's real. Sometimes when a friendship ends, especially if it ends badly or confusingly, you're angry. Angry at them for leaving, for changing, for not explaining, for letting it fade when you would have fought for it, for moving on like it was easy. That anger is valid. It's part of grief. It doesn't mean you're a bad person or that the friendship wasn't real. It means you cared enough to be hurt, and the hurt is expressing itself as rage. You don't have to stay angry forever, but you're allowed to feel it. You're allowed to be furious that someone who mattered so much could walk away. That's not petty. That's human. Accept that you might never understand. You might never get the explanation. You might never know what changed, what you did, what happened inside their head. Some losses stay mysterious. Maybe they were going through something you'll never know about. Maybe there was a misunderstanding that was never clarified. Maybe they just changed in ways that had nothing to do with you. The need for explanation is real, but the explanation isn't always available, and waiting for it can keep you stuck. At some point, you have to decide, am I going to keep waiting for an answer that might never come? Or am I going to accept the loss and move forward without understanding it? Both choices are valid, but only one lets you move. Now here are some questions to ask yourself, because I think these might help you figure out where you are. First question, are you trying to resurrect it or bury it? This sounds simple, but it's not. Sometimes we reach out because we genuinely want to rebuild, but sometimes we reach out because we can't stand the ambiguity and we want it to end one way or another. We want clarity more than we want the friendship. Both are valid, but they're different, and knowing which one you're doing matters for how you approach it. If you're trying to resurrect, know that it might not work. The friendship you had might not be available anymore. The person they were, the person you were, might not exist in the same way. You might rebuild something, but it probably won't be what you lost. It'll be something new with the ghost of the old thing hovering around it. If you're trying to bury, that's okay too. Sometimes we need to reach out one more time just to confirm what we already know, to give ourselves permission to grieve by getting the rejection we've been sensing but haven't received explicitly. Second question, have you already tried? If you've reached out 3 times and gotten nothing back, you have your answer. The silence is the answer. It's not the answer you wanted, but it's an answer. Reaching out a 4th time isn't hope. It's refusing to accept what's already been communicated. I know that sounds harsh, but I think there's a dignity in accepting someone's silence, rather than demanding they reject you with words. They've made a choice. You don't have to like it, but you can respect it. Third question, did you do something? This is the hardest one, because sometimes the answer is yes. Maybe you weren't there when they needed you. Maybe you said something you can't take back. Maybe you slowly, without meaning to, became someone they didn't want to be around. If that's the case, and you know it, you can apologize. Once, clearly, without expectation. Not, I'm sorry if you felt hurt, but I'm sorry I hurt you. Not to get them back. Not to make yourself feel better. Just to acknowledge what happened, and then let it be. The apology is for the record. What they do with it is up to them. Fourth question, is it actually over? Sometimes friendships go dormant, not dead, just sleeping. People get absorbed in jobs, relationships, kids, life. They don't stop caring, they just stop having capacity. I have friendships like this, people I might not talk to for 2 years, but when we do, it's like no time passed. The connection is still there. It just doesn't require constant maintenance. So maybe what feels like loss is actually just distance, and distance isn't always permanent. The question is, if they reached out tomorrow, would you feel relief or dread? If relief, it's probably not over. It's just on pause. If dread, something broke that you might not want to fix. There's another philosopher I want to mention, Friedrich Nietzsche. He had this concept he called Sternenfreundschaft, star friendship. Nietzsche is usually associated with harsh ideas, the will to power, the death of God, the Übermensch. He's the philosopher people quote when they want to sound tough, when they want to talk about strength and overcoming. But he also wrote about friendship with surprising tenderness. He understood something about loss that I think we need to hear. The idea of star friendship is this. Sometimes two people are close for a while, genuinely close, but their paths are leading different places. And at some point, those paths diverge, not because of betrayal, not because of conflict, not because anyone did anything wrong, just because of trajectory. Think about it. You meet someone at a certain point in your life. You're both going in similar directions. You have similar questions, similar struggles, similar ways of seeing the world. And so, you travel together. And it's wonderful. It's exactly what you needed at that moment. But people change, circumstances change. What you wanted at 20 might not be what you want at 30. The questions you were asking might have been answered, or replaced by different questions. The struggles might have shifted. The person you were becoming at one point might not be the person you're becoming now. And sometimes, when that happens, the friendship doesn't fit anymore. Not because it was bad, not because anyone failed, just because it was built for versions of you that no longer exist. Nietzsche wrote, "We were friends and have become estranged." But this was right, and we do not want to hide or obscure it from ourselves as if we had to be ashamed of it. We are two ships, each of which has its own goal and its own course. Two ships, each with its own goal, its own course. I find something relieving in this, because not every friendship that ends is a failure. Not every loss is a tragedy. Sometimes it's just physics. Two objects that were moving together, now moving apart. No one's fault. No one's choice, really. Just the way the paths went. We want endings to have villains. We want to be able to say, it ended because they did this, or it ended because I did that. We want cause and effect. We want someone to blame. We want the loss to make sense. But sometimes there's no one to blame. Sometimes two people who loved each other simply grew in directions that no longer overlapped. And the only honest response is to acknowledge it. Nietzsche says we should honor these friendships from a distance, like stars that were once close but whose orbits have separated. We can still acknowledge their light even from far away. We can still remember what they meant even as they recede, not with resentment, not with longing, not with the desperate hope that somehow the orbits will realign, just with recognition. That was real. That mattered. And it's over. Both of those things can be true. They don't cancel each other out. So here's what I want to leave you with. If you're grieving a friendship right now, if you lost someone who mattered, and you're not sure you're allowed to feel how you feel, you're allowed. It's not just a friendship. It's not less than a romantic loss. It's not something you should be over by now. It's real. It counted. And you're allowed to miss it. The absence you feel has a shape. The silence has a texture. The The space where that person used to be is not empty. It's full of everything that was. And maybe, like Montaigne, you'll carry it for a long time. Maybe forever. Maybe that's okay. Because some losses aren't meant to be gotten over. Some losses are meant to be carried. Not as burdens, but as evidence. Evidence that you loved someone. Evidence that they mattered. Evidence that you're the kind of person who can feel that deeply. That's not weakness. That's not pathology. That's just what it looks like to have loved someone who mattered. Montaigne carried La Boétie for 27 years. He never stopped writing about him, never stopped feeling the absence. And he didn't see that as failure. He saw it as honesty, because he was he, and I was I. That's still the truest thing anyone has ever said about why we love the people we love, and why it hurts so much when they're gone. The worst breakup isn't romantic. It's the one no one teaches you how to grieve. It's the one you're supposed to just get over. It's the one where someone who knew you completely becomes someone who doesn't know you at all. And the hardest part isn't losing them. It's losing the version of yourself that only existed when they were there. But here's the thing, that version of you was real. It shaped who you became after. And in some strange way, it's still with you. Hidden, quiet. But there, the friendship ended. The effect didn't. Whatever you became because of that person, whatever they taught you, whatever parts of yourself they helped you discover, you still have those. They're yours now. They don't require the friendship to continue existing. The loss is real, but it's not total. Something remains. Something always remains. Real things leave marks, even when they're gone, especially when they're gone.